I'm going to just go for it because when we overthink our intros, then they just sound bad.
Okay, sorry.
But just for anybody who's out there listening, this is, what did we decide to call it? I forgot. Underappreciated.
Going well.
Yeah, it's going well. It really is. But these are tester, we'll get
there.
The hang of it. Yeah. But we are authors and friends, and we're best friends no matter what Naomi says. We
business partners.
Yeah, we're business partners. We've been together as work wives for, I don't know, a little over a decade, but we love talking about books and we love talking about movies and the industry and everything. But the best thing to talk about is like the ones that don't get a lot of like limelight or spotlight, or the ones that are really underappreciated in the industry. And so that's what we want to talk about in this podcast. So yeah, that's what it's about. Anything you want to add?
Let's say, well, just that Cassie came to me and said, hey, I have an idea and you can tell me no if you want to. I was like, okay, I'm probably going to say yes because I always do. And she's like, I want to do a podcast. And I was like, okay, yes. And she's like, can you let me explain it first? I was like, okay, what is it? Then she said, I would just want to have a podcast where we talk about books that are underappreciated because there's so many good books out there and nobody talks about them. And that's not cool. So I was like, absolutely, that sounds awesome because I have a list of authors who I love and they deserve more love.
Absolutely. Like, we're late to the book top game, but like, I feel like maybe it's just the algorithm or whatever, but I don't know. Every time I look at Book Talk, it's like the same 4 books or the same 4 authors over and over again. Like I'm waiting to see new ones. I feel
like the way the algorithm is too, is if you talk about those specific books, you're going to get more views. So I actually saw a video of somebody that was like, if you haven't even read the book, just use the book because it'll get you views. And I'm like, that's not cool. Like, you want to read the book, you want to appreciate it and talk about it, you love it, not because it's going to get you views. Wow. So yeah, when I heard that, and it was right before you came to me about this podcast, and I was like, no, we need to, absolutely.
Yeah, I was like, I like shining a light, which is kind of funny with our first subject that we decided to pick because it obviously has a lot of limelight and a lot of spotlight, and it's made a ton of money, but it's underappreciated in its talent and in what it did for the book industry. So like you said, when you approached me about Twilight and you said, let's do that one. And I was like, underappreciated, Theresa. And then you went on to say how underappreciated Twilight really is. I'm like, I am so on board. Like I could talk and rant about forever about it, but I'll try to keep it to, 40 minutes.
Exactly. And I mean, the idea for Twilight came to me when I did, a book talk or TikTok, and it said, what is the book that got you reading again? And that book for me was Twilight.
Did you get like a lot of response from that or?
Well, no, because I just started posting about myself and like putting my face on camera. So it's been a very slow start. And someone said that the TikTok changed the algorithm too. So like getting views is really hard. Yeah. So I've had a lot of views on it. I haven't had a lot of comments on it. I think I had a couple that just said same and that was it. But I know there are.
Yeah. I was like, at least you have people, who are like, yes, that's completely accurate.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I was telling my mom about it and how we were going to do this and talk about Twilight. And I'm the one that got my mom to read Twilight. And she never read before. Like growing up, she never read ever.
Oh, that doesn't even I can't even comprehend it. Like my kids don't read, but I was like, that's because they live in this day and age of the Oculus and Xbox and PlayStation and all that. Like they they have so many other things to entertain them. I was like, I had books. Like that's what I used to entertain myself. So I was always a reader. So that always just kind of like boggles my mind when people don't grow up reading.
Yeah, I grew up reading when I was like really young, like between the ages of like 5 and 10, probably. I would go to the library and take out the maximum of 10 books at a time. and I loved it. And then somewhere along the way, I like fell off, and I would just read every now and again. You know, I love young adult books, so I'd be reading like Sarah Depton and, you know, stuff like that. But it was few and far between. It wasn't a lot. I mean, obviously, my Goosebump books, R.L. Stine, like those I always read. But yeah, it wasn't until I was at work, and I feel like an old person, but I was probably like in my mid-20s, and there was a bunch of girls that worked in the office with me that were like 17 and 18, and they would not stop talking about these books with vampires and werewolves. And I literally was like, that sounds so stupid. I was like, I would never read something like that. Like, you've got to be kidding me. But they just kept talking about it and talking about it. And I think at that time, the final book was coming out, and they were like making plans to go to like the bookstore and get in line at like, I don't know, 1 a.m. or something like that. And I'm like, for a book, are you out of your mind? Like, what the heck? I couldn't fathom this. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a try, because this is when I started reading again.
Were you writing at this time too?
I mean, just the last
book I think came out in 2008.
Yeah, so I just started writing in 2008. Okay. And I just started reading again. I just started writing. And I was like, I'm going to give this Twilight series a try. Like, why not? I read all 4 books in probably 4 or 5 days.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I devoured them. Like, I didn't sleep. I just read. And like at work, I would bring the books to work with me, and I would be sneaking them under my desk because we weren't allowed to like read back then. And so I would have it under my desk, and when my boss would go by, I would like push it up onto the desk underneath so like he couldn't see it. I don't think I talked to Eric for like those 4 days, because I literally just had my nose in the book the entire time.
I'm reading, quiet you.
Yes, exactly. And it just opened my eyes to like something I never thought that I would actually enjoy. And I thoroughly like enjoyed it, loved it. Like, and then from there, I went and tried to find every young adult paranormal book that I could.
Right.
And most of the books on my bookshelf is from that time. Like like a huge, like, it opened my eyes to so many new authors, and it was great.
I was like, wasn't Beautiful, what are they called? Beautiful Creatures? Isn't that around series. Around the same time period?
I have on my bookshelf is the entire Twilight series. And then I have a figurine of Edward in the middle. And on the other side is all the beautiful creature books.
Oh my gosh. That's how mine is displayed. I'm not even kidding.
Really?
Yeah. I have all of my Stephanie Meyers, and then my beautiful creature books, and then Hunger Games on the other side.
And on the other side of beautiful creatures, I have Stacey Cade's The Ghost and the Goth.
Oh yeah. I love those.
Queen of the Dead. Yeah. So again, I never would have read any of those books if I didn't read Twilight.
Oh, same. I think, I was like, my mom was the one who got me into Twilight, which was funny that it was like turned
opposite.
Around. Yeah. I was like, my mom, I was a reader, but when it came, like I said, like growing up, I read Boxcar Children, like, and Babysitter's Club, like those, you know, normal where you just devour one book after another and you read the entire, 80 book series. And, but then it was like, once I got hooked on Harry Potter, it was just Harry Potter, like just one book after the other, and then restarting it. Like that's what I read in high school. So, but I got married young. I got married at 18, and I got married in 2006. So I didn't discover the Twilight ones until I had just had my firstborn, and I was 20 at that time. And I was like, Mom, I'm up late all the time. Like there's nothing on TV, because, you know, this was back in the day when you had to watch like the soap network at 3 a.m. And so that's how I got into One Tree Hill, but that's a moot point. I was like, I don't know what to do. And she's like, oh, I just finished these books and they're so good. I think you'll love them. And I devoured them all. Bam, bam, bam. Like one after, just up at night, feeding my baby, reading Twilight. And it's really hard to hold those thick books while while you're feeding your baby. But I did it. Man, it was like,
that so addicting.
Yeah, it really was. And I think what it did for me, and I was, like I said, I got married really young, and so I had to grow up really quickly. And what it did was it kind of gave me permission to be young again. Like, And I love that that is what that book did for a lot of like middle-aged women at the time. It gave us permission to like kind of fangirl over something, because you think about the things that were popular, like they all had kind of male protagonists. And this one had a female one, and it was about a love story. And I love that it celebrated romance. And so I think that's why I related to it and why I love it so much.
It's funny that you say that. It's funny because that's probably the same thing at this time. I mean, so the last book came out in 2008. I graduated high school in 2003. Mm-hmm. And I mean, even now I'm like, I still feel like I'm younger than I actually am. So at that time, I still was stuck in that mindset of like, I miss being a teenager, and like, I still want to like, you know, be that. And I was able to be that while reading those books. I was able to, you know, relive those things. Yeah. So I totally get that.
Yeah. And one of my things too, and I will try not to get too ranty about this, but I feel like that people underappreciate Twilight for many reasons, but one of them is because of the protagonist, Bella. And I like will fight tooth and nail to defend Bella because I was like, not only did I relate to her, but like, you know, those memes that came out where like, you know, there's all these female strength or whatever, and then they make fun of Bella being the one that always is rescued or whatever. I was like, are these people reading the same books that I read? Because she was super strong in who she was. I was like, and I could give several examples in each book. I'll give a few because I'll try not to go ranting. But like in the first book, when Edward saves her from the crash or whatever, and she goes to the hospital, and she like confronts him. She goes up to him and she's like, listen, obviously you like pushed this van away. And I'm talking about the book. The movie did it too, kind of, but like, and he's like, no, you hit your head. You're like, and I know me at 17 would have been like, oh, he's totally right. Like, he's so cute.
Oh yeah. Like you want to push it. You want to just walk away.
Yeah. It happened so fast. I did get in a car crash at 16. And I'm like, to this day, someone told me that my light was red. And I was like, no, it was green. I know it was green. A car went in front of me and this guy turned left and hit me. And he's like, no, you had a red light or whatever. And to this day, I'm like, was it green? Was it red? Like you start to question your sanity a bit. And Bella was like, no, I know what I saw. And I know you're different. Tell me. And I won't tell anybody. Just be honest with me. And I thought that was really like brave of her to stand up to this guy who she was very curious about, but who's obviously something different than he is. Like he is a quote unquote monster. She doesn't know that yet, but
she knows that he definitely has something about him that could make him dangerous. Yet she still pursues like figuring out what he is and showing that she's not
going to go along with it or anything like that. And I thought that was super brave of her. It's also very brave to be vulnerable, and she falls in love very quickly, and she falls in love. And she also like the whole premise of the book, in the first one, at least, she moves to this place that she hasn't been in who knows how long. She's choosing to let her mom kind of go through this, I don't know if crisis. You would call it a midlife crisis or whatever, but like to basically go be with her boyfriend instead of her own daughter. And she gives her permission, no matter how she feels about it, to go spend time with a dad she doesn't really know. And
that's a mature thing to do.
It's a very mature thing to do. Also, she steps into a new school and gets hit on by every single person.
Oh, God, everyone.
Yes. And she's hit on by everyone. And because she's hit on by everyone, then she gets the jealousy factor from some of the girls or whatever. And she's still like this is what she has to deal with. And that is what some girls have to deal with. Like, not some girls, a lot of women have to deal with. And she deals with it in a very mature way, especially at 17.
Winds up becoming friends with those girls that are jealous of her.
Yeah. She's like, okay, I'll be friends with you. And, you know, not even like, even in her internal, she doesn't really badmouth these people.
Yeah.
And I thought, and so that, and then one more example, I'm sorry. Like
go for it.
When Jacob kisses her and she punches him in the face, like at that point, she knows he's a werewolf. She knows how strong he is. he's one of her best friends. And she says, this is a line that you crossed. And she punches a werewolf in the face. Like, and people think she's not strong, that she needs to be rescued all the time. But she rescues Edward all the time. Like, she slices her hand open.
I was just going to say that. Yes. To kind of like, and everyone, I remember like, it was more or less when the movie came out. And I feel like that's when you got the people that didn't read the books and didn't understand it.
Maybe it wasn't conveyed as well in the movies.
I think that's what it was, because it seems so like anticlimactic, I guess, when she does it in the movie, that she like she's just standing there and everyone's like, really, that's what you're doing? But no, she's drawing the vampire to her.
Yes, I was like, the internal that you read in the book during that part where she's like, because she feels like she's this weak person. And I mean, who else would feel that way when you're surrounded by all these strong people, you know, like physically strong people. And she's like, well, I'll do what I can. And this is what I can do, is sacrifice myself for the love of my life. And you know, what more strength do you need, is basically, you know.
Exactly.
So,
and then when you go to the next book, when she gets pregnant,
and she chooses her baby's life over her own again,
and even over the wishes of the love of her life. And she calls his sister, who she knows will protect her. She goes against everything that he hates
her, by the way.
Yes.
Like, who like has been very vocal about how she feels about Bella. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to call her, because she will protect my baby. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, she could have called Alice. They're like besties, but no, she called, oh my
Rosalie.
God, thank you. I'm like, it starts with an R and I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah.
She called Rosalie. And I mean, because she, again, being a mature person, she knew that was her best bet.
And I love that this is such a female driven like book, where it gives us so many, not just Bella. I was like, you think about all of the female characters in this book, even Jessica, you know, you can relate to them in some sort of way and also find strength in who they are. And you look at the boys too, and you're like, you boys are sometimes dum-dums. Like, and I think that is another reason why so many people loved it. And I hate that it's become this like kind of taboo thing to say, oh, I love Twilight. I love.
Yeah, you get bashed on, and people tell you that like you don't know what a good book is. It's like, trust me, I have read far and wide. I don't discriminate against anything. I will read everything.
Yeah.
And I look at Twilight as what it did for me as a reader, how it brought me into reading again, and how it opened my mind to trying new things and not just reading contemporary romance. Like, it brought me into the paranormal world. And to this day, some of my favorite books are paranormal.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, now I read like, you know, adult ones like Rebecca Zanetti, like I absolutely love, which you know, because I talk about that all the time. But like, I never would have like even given these a shot. And then it's not even just that, like, the way it brought people together. I mean, people made friendships with people that they never even met. Like, this is when online was also starting to become like bigger and bigger. And like, you know, I know a lot of people today just, you know, especially the younger generation can't fathom a life without the internet. But this was a time when the internet was just like really up and coming. And I think
this was the time of like baby Facebook. And like,
yes, exactly. And there were so many groups and just friendships formed because of Twilight. And to me, I think that deserves recognition. And I know that there's people out there that are still friends with people from their Twilight groups.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. I mean, those friendships have lasted years.
I was like, and they can bond over this thing that, I was like, that can bring them to other things that they have in common. And
exactly.
Let's talk real quick. Sorry, I'm choking on my own spit. I was like, let's talk a bit about the writing, because I think that gets a lot of vitriol too, of just being a badly written book. And I just think about, poor Stephanie Meyer, because I mean, not poor Stephanie Meyer, but I also feel like I wrote my first book, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And it wasn't. And this was her first book. Like, this was her first publication and everything like that. if you look at her work, she just released Midnight Sun 2 years ago. And I can't believe it was 2 years ago. It feels like it was just,
feels like it was yesterday.
Yeah. I was
honestly.
like, you can tell that her writing has improved because obviously it's been more than a decade. It's been 15 years since her first publication. So like, if I was to put my very first work out, and granted, my very first book that I published, I cringe at, like, I sit and cringe, but to have it become such a big worldwide like phenomenon basically, and then have it ripped to shreds by so many literary people,
and have that as the basis of your like entire career, not allowing you to have growth. It's terrible.
Yes. I was like, exactly. That was trying. Yeah. You put it exactly how I wanted to say, because because like I couldn't explain it, and you just put it. I was like, to have that be like, oh, this is how she writes. Oh, like I would be devastated to think that if my first book is how people view how I write nowadays, like,
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have probably 5 books that I wrote that will never see the light of day.
Exactly,
ever, because just no. And even like the first book I ever published, like I still go back and I'm like, there's so many things in that I would change, or like reading it now, I'm like, oh, and there's just so many things that I know now that I wouldn't have done then, but I wasn't me then. I was past me then, that had to learn and, develop my skill and hone that.
The fact that her very first book became such a huge thing, it obviously, the writing was good enough to impress, a publisher. It was good enough to impress so many people.
What? Regardless of the writing too, it is a damn good story.
Yeah.
It sucks you in. And there's so many like moving pieces to the whole overall story with like, with their story, but then you get the backstory of the other characters, and there's the Volturi, and there's just so many other things going on. And it's, and then you have Jacob and, the wolves and like that whole story. And there's just so much like to just grab onto. And it's so interesting. And that's what I think that's the reason I think it is so successful, because of the story, regardless of the writing. And I mean, the writing honestly is not bad, like at all. But
I think the story was told in a way for younger audiences to understand and older audiences to appreciate. Like, I feel like that's how her writing was done. And so like when I read The Host, it was written, I mean, the writing was better, but it was a little bit more confusing to me. And I think maybe it was because she was listening to all of these people, improve, or maybe it wasn't her, it was her publisher or whatever, use this language or use this or whatever to explain things. And I love The Host. I think it's one of my favorite books, but it was different in tonally,
Oh, for sure.
From
Absolutely.
Twilight.
Yeah. You wouldn't think that it was the same author that wrote it.
No. And that comes from, hearing all of, like, she probably has to, like, with my first book, I was always looking at reviews, and I was always like, it's exciting. And it's also, cause I mean, my first book became a bestseller, and it was like huge for me. But I was also young too. I was 23, 25. I don't remember. And, I was younger, and I took those to heart, every single like bad thing that was said. And so I feel like all newbie authors kind of do that. So I worry that that's what happened with her.
Yeah, and because you have your own voice, and when you listen to outside critique, which is fine, and it does help you grow as a writer, but when you listen to it too much, it winds up changing your voice and what's, makes you recognizable in your writing. And I don't know if you remember this, but you were editing one of my books, and it was during a time when I was reading a ton of books on writing craft and plotting and all this other stuff. And I remember you sent it back to me, and you're like, all those books you're reading, throw them out and stop it, because you're losing your voice. Like, you are listening to what everyone else is telling you how to write a good book, and you're completely losing yourself in it.
I put my editor head on that.
Yeah.
Apparently.
But it's true, because that's what happens. And unfortunately, when somebody gets knocked down so much, and they're looking to improve, sometimes they wind up losing what made them special in the first place.
Well, and I feel like, especially when I worked with a publisher, it's not just you looking at those, it's all these other people. And my publisher, I don't know how hers was, but my publisher caved to that kind of pressure.
Yep.
To change. Oh, I just got the warning that the meeting will end in 10 minutes. So we got to wrap it up.
Okay. Well, I can keep talking. I feel like I haven't touched the surface of what I actually like.
Right.
Mind.
Well, is there anything else? I mean, we talked about the writing, and we talked about Bella, and we talked about Stephenie Meyer and everything. What else is underappreciated about Twilight, or is there something else that you wanted to bring up?
Well, I mean, we touched on it a little bit. I think it's just the fandom and what it did for, bringing people together. And then beyond that, what it did for the book community in general. I mean, you had people waiting in line, like they were trying to get it's Black Friday and they're trying to get like a discount,
right? Yeah.
I was going to say a VCR. That's how old I am.
Oh my gosh, VCR. What was the last Black Friday you went to?
Yeah, so like a flat screen TV or something. I mean, you literally had people waiting online at Barnes and Noble. So and this was at a time when I don't know if Barnes and Noble was struggling back then, but I wouldn't be surprised, because it seemed like the whole book world, because that was they're starting to talk about ebooks back then. I feel like that was slowly starting to be a thing.
Yeah.
And it really got people back in the bookstores and really excited about books. I don't think I've ever seen that, at least in my time, where people were that excited to go to the bookstore to the point where they were waiting in line for hours just to get a single copy.
With Harry Potter. That was the only book, but maybe because I was in those lines. That was the only one I really saw with that much hype. But I mean, Harry Potter series ended. Oh gosh, when did the last one come out? I want to say 2006. So I mean, it overlapped with Twilight.
Oh yeah.
But just a little bit. And the movies had come out at that point, so Harry Potter was getting a lot of attention and things like that. But I think the movies, we did bring up, or no, we didn't bring it up. We looked it up before about how much Stephenie was worth, and how much her movies made, and how she made in 2009. What was it? It was a lot of money.
Like 120 million or something like that.
Well, she's worth 120 million. I think she made over 4 million just the year that she didn't publish anything. It was just 2009, the year after the first Twilight came out, the movie. And so all her books made that much money. It's insanity. It's just and good on her, And
you know what? I always wonder, because there were so many stories, like I said, within Twilight that she could have did so many spin-off series. And I wonder if all of the negativity towards her, because she did get a lot, we can't deny it. That's why we're talking about it, because we think it was a little much. But how many other books would she have put out if she wasn't, just ripped apart so much because of these books? I think I wanted to know the backstory, and they did it a little bit in the movies because they did do it a little bit in the books, but I wanted more.
Yeah. I would like to have seen Jasper. Jasper. I was just going to say Jasper and Alice and Rosalie. I loved Rosalie's story, and I would have loved to see more from that. I wonder, if she had gotten that much hate.
Was it Brie Tanner? Taylor? What was it?
It's Brie Tanner, I think.
Okay, I was right. Yeah. Okay. I have that on my shelf. So she came out with that one, and it probably didn't do well because, spoiler alert, I mean, she dies.
Yeah.
So there's no romance there. So I feel like that's probably why it didn't do as well, because obviously these books were about the romance and everything.
Yeah. And she might have kind of veered her passion too. I think because the last book that she put out, besides Midnight Sun, I think was The Chemist, I want to say, and it's not a romance. It's more of a mystery. And I was like, maybe her passion just changed to something else,
That's
because
true.
I'm not sure if it was just because that's how she felt, or I would love to like sit down with her and ask her all of
And
these
ask
questions.
her, right?
Like,
Well, I mean,
and yeah, I was like,
you
it
also
just,
got to remember too that she was a stay-at-home mom that had
yeah.
a dream and woke up and started writing. So to me,
Mhm.
and I also, after I read Twilight, that was like, I started like dabbling in writing a little bit, but after reading that, that's what really like triggered, like, I want to be a writer.
Right.
I want to be able to create worlds that people love, and like it brings people together and they love reading. Like that's what I
Yeah.
wanted.
I would have
So
loved to just see like how, like, I wonder how she just felt after, like, to think that you get this much attention just, and you're just like this humble beginnings kind of person. Like,
yeah, you're just a
just, it would
stay-at-home
have been
mom who
cool.
just decides to write down her dream and submit it to an agent, and then like the rest is history. But like,
Right.
I think a lot of writers that we love today
Yeah.
probably would credit Twilight for getting into writing and reading in the first place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's where it's underappreciated, because I don't think people are so quick to judge, and I don't think they realize like the depth of how far this series has touched within the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. Like 100%.
Yeah.
And I would have just loved to be like a fly on the wall, just to see her experience that kind of
Right.
like attention, and how she dealt with it, and how like excited she was. And but also on the flip side, you get to see like the raw. I mean, you feel it as an author, or like we're authors, so we kind of understand like putting yourself out there and being so vulnerable with the words that you've written and the world you created, and then seeing so many people kind of like hate on it. Like when we had that discussion on whether we wanted to be famous or not, I think we were asking each other like 20 questions or something like that.
Yes.
And both of us were like, no. Like, the money would be nice, but
exactly.
Like,
and it's like,
besides that, I don't know. Like, it seems like you're just opening yourself up to be just ridiculed all the time.
Criticized, yeah. And like, I'm all about like, you know, trying to be successful and like furthering your career and stuff like that. But the criticism and the just the nastiness of what I've even seen on, like, I couldn't even imagine if these books came out during the time of book talk, because
right.
I mean, right now we say there's the same 4 books, and everyone loves them, but now I'm seeing the hate of those 4 books as well, which is just terrible. And people are
get
mean.
it from both sides. Yeah.
I think that they just like, I don't know if it's someone that just wants to go against the grain and just wants to like, you know, ruffle feathers or whatever, but I couldn't even imagine those books coming out at this time, and what would have happened if they would have been even more hated, or if they would have been more loved. Like, I'm really like, it's something interesting to think about. But yeah, I would not want to be no that famous.
No thanks.
Just because, yeah, it really opened you up, and that's a scary place to be in.
It is, yeah. It completely,
you have to be a strong person to be able to handle that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I would delete all social media at that point. Like, I don't know.
Oh, right. And just be like, I don't have to be on here anymore.
Exactly.
It's probably good for the soul anyway.
That's true. That probably is.
Well, we have 2 minutes left in our thing, so I'll just wrap it up. I had fun talking about Twilight. This is fun.
I did too.
Because it just brought me back to like, why it's so important, and why it's underappreciated, and why it should be more appreciated. I was like, we should have just a new wave of Twilight. I would love that. And
right? I would love that
too. In 2020 when Midnight Sun came out, I did like everybody posting about it. I thought it was fun.
You know what? And I bought it. I pre-ordered it, of course, and I still have not read it. And I think it's because I read when the when it got
leaked. Yeah.
So I had read that.
I've read that so many times.
And I loved it. And now I'm just, you know me with expectations and them getting ruined. I am so afraid that it's like not going to meet my expectations, just because I've built it up so much in my mind for how many years. Yeah. And I know that if I read it, I'll probably love it, but I'm just scared.
It's pure nostalgia. I liked it. I felt like it needed an editor just to kind of edit it down, because Edward was really wordy, but like I loved it. I thought it was great nostalgia, and I was like, it's so great to see her again, like publishing. So all right. We have less than a minute, so I'll wrap it up real quick. But thanks for listening in, and we'll have more underappreciated books and everything and let us know your thoughts. I don't know if there's comments or anything on Spotify, but probably YouTube.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll be back again, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. All right.
Bye.
Bye.